McLean could be heard on police body cam video uttering, "I can't breathe," the same words that Eric Garner and George Floyd said before they died in police custody. Here's NBC's David Gura.
McLean was 23 years old, heading home from a neighborhood convenience store. You can see him in this newly obtained surveillance footage.
It was always his juice and his snack. He would come and put it on the counter and then buy with cash mostly, and then give a bow before leaving the store.
After he left, he was walking and dancing, wearing a ski mask. Someone thought that was suspicious and called 911.
It is important to note that walking around with a ski mask is not illegal.
His family says he sometimes wore a ski mask to keep warm because he was anemic.
And when you go back to the 911 call...
Yeah, he's walking south on Billings Street and he has a mask on.
The caller tells the dispatcher a man looks sketchy, but makes no mention of any crime.
Were any weapons involved or mentioned?
No.
Officers arrive at the scene.
Stop. I have a right to stop you because you're being suspicious. Well, okay. Turn around.
And within 19 seconds, an escalation.
The caller didn't say that Elijah did anything illegal. He said, hey, there's a guy wearing a mask. He kind of is waving his hand. Seems a little strange. You might want to check it out. He says he might be a good guy, might be a bad guy. And so, Gail, when the police responded, instead of observing, instead of watching, hanging back for a bit, the police moved in immediately to stop him. And everything went south from there. According to the district attorney's report, the medical examiner was unable to determine a cause of death.
Paramedics injected Elijah with ketamine, a sedative. He died a few days later in the hospital.
Mr. Young, do you believe there was a moment in this where the officers could have de-escalated the situation?
Absolutely, 100%. They could have done a million things differently. He didn't need to die.
Law enforcement officers are dedicated. Every day they put on a uniform and deal with everything from pesky kids on skateboards to bank heists. And while officers always strive to do their best, sometimes they encounter situations more suited for social workers, like dealing with mental health crisis calls, which is why we have crisis intervention teams. CIT programs teach law enforcement officers how to safely de-escalate mental health crisis situations. In fact, law enforcement agencies that have CIT programs in place have reported as much as an 80% decrease in officer injuries during mental health crisis situations. Not only do CIT programs educate officers, they also bring together community members and mental health care providers to offer convenient options for treatment. Learn more about CIT programs by visiting NAMI.org/CIT.
Relax or I'm going to have to change this situation.
During a struggle, one officer says this.
Just grab your gun, dude.
Stop, dude.
8 minutes pass with McLean handcuffed on the ground, occasionally throwing up.
My name's Elijah McLean. What's this going on?
Paramedics soon give him ketamine, a sedative. 7 minutes later, responding officers are told he has no pulse in the back of an ambulance.
Are you serious? Yeah.
Everyone in this room has a unique voice, something about you that is different from others. And I want you to take a moment to think about what that difference is.
I'm just different. It's all.
Neen McLean is Elijah's mother.
He wanted to heal people. He was a massage therapist. He not only healed others, but he healed himself. He was able to accept love and give love in various forms.
Let go of me.
No, I am an introvert. Please respect the boundaries that I am speaking.
Stop tensing up. Stop. Relax.
Stop. I'm going home.
McLean was a 23-year-old massage therapist who liked to play the violin for shelter animals. He weighed just 140 pounds.
And then give a bow before leaving the store.
Now I want you to imagine what it would be like if for your entire life you had no idea that difference existed. There is a group of people whose unique voice, whose very diversity is so well hidden that's invisible even to themselves. I was one of those people. I am autistic, and I had no idea until I was diagnosed at the age of 35. Autism is a condition that affects how a person communicates, how they relate to people, and how they experience the world around them. Autistic people see, hear, and feel the world differently to non-autistic people. And while no two autistic people are the same, we do share common traits, such as how we communicate, how we are able to plan and carry out tasks. The level of difficulty a person has with these traits will shape where they fit on the spectrum. Now, a lot of people think that the autistic spectrum is a straight line with severe autism at one end and mild autism at the other, but it's not like that at all. Autism is like a kaleidoscope of colours, like that colour wheel on your computer where all the colours blend into one another. So let's have a look at these autistic traits. We have sensory issues. That's how you see, hear, and feel. So an autistic person may have amazing hearing and they may be able to pick out minute details that other people can't see. Autistic people are fantastic at finding where's Wally, but they may struggle to process audible sounds. We have social communication. That's how we communicate and how we understand how other people communicate. It involves things like understanding body language, sarcasm, and humour. Autistic people can take things very literally. So a saying such as, he wears his heart on his sleeve, may be very difficult for an autistic person to understand, because how can the human heart exist outside of the body, never mind on the sleeve of a shirt? We have executive function.
Happy super late birthday.
Wait, really?
No, really?
I was like, no way, this is a luau party.
We're also taught at a young age how to present ourselves. Flapping our hands and tapping our head are not socially acceptable, so we're not encouraged to do those things. But those movements can be a lifeline to an autistic person. They are called stimming, and they are crucial.
I was like, no way, this is a luau party. There you go.
For me, stimming is a crucial form of communication. When I'm happy and excited, I flap my hands. And when I'm trying to process information or block out sensory input, I twitch my fingers really close to my face and it blocks out everything else. But this and this is not socially acceptable. And I learned at a very young age to hide my stimming. I learned to keep it inside me until I was in my room on my own, where I could rock and I could jump and I could flap my hands and tap my head. In autism, we also have these labels which I hate, and they are high functioning and low functioning. And the reason I don't like them is because they're misunderstood and they're misused a lot. People assume that high functioning means that your autism is mild, when in fact high functioning simply means that your IQ is above 70. It's also often used to describe an autistic person who can speak. Low functioning being the opposite, with an IQ below 70, and is usually often used to describe an autistic person who can't communicate with speech. But the truth is, somebody can have a low IQ, and they may not communicate by speech, but they may not be massively affected by their autism. Equally, I am high functioning, but my autism is not mild. And I start struggling with intense emotions that I can't identify. And eventually my brain crashes, much like a computer. It cannot cope. Everything stops. I can't speak. I can't hear. I can't respond. I am having a full-blown meltdown, and there's nothing I can do. I am on the floor. I'm rocking. I'm crying. I'm biting myself, and I'm hitting myself. And I can't stop it. It is like having a seizure. You're semi-aware it's happening, but there's nothing you can do other than ride it out.
During the struggle, paramedics injected Elijah with ketamine, a sedative. He died a few days later in the hospital.
Masking autism is dangerous and it is killing autistic people. Autistic people have a life expectancy of 10 years less than their peers. 10 years. And the number one cause of death is suicide. At the age of 35, I discovered my unique voice. I discovered I was autistic. But I also discovered that society is stifling the voices of autistic people. We need to also let our autistic children be autistic. We need to stop forcing out behaviours we don't understand. And instead, we need to encourage their special interests and their unique skills. I am autistic, and this is my unique voice. Thank you.
Breaking news. The 10-day ordeal, 12 young boys and their soccer coach found alive in a flooded cave in Thailand.
Remember when that happened? It was one of the most difficult rescue missions of all time, involving as many as 10,000 people. And now, we know that rescuers gave the boys a drug, which helped the mission succeed. That drug was ketamine. Ketamine was first synthesized in the 1960s as an anesthetic, a sedative. That's why it was so useful in the rescue mission. But ketamine actually has a lot of different uses. In the 80s, it became a popular club drug, gaining nicknames like Special K and Cat Valium. And more recently, in early 2019, a form of ketamine was approved by the FDA as an antidepressant. So how does a drug that's so multi-purpose actually work? Ketamine is what scientists call a dirty drug. That means it doesn't just target one system in your brain, but dozens. It has a weak effect on opiate receptors in the dopamine system, which drugs like heroin and cocaine target. But most importantly, ketamine manipulates a neurotransmitter called glutamate, earning it the attention of psychiatrists nationwide. Glutamate is what many of the neurons in your brain use to communicate with each other. And without it, well, your brain would essentially shut down, like a city grid without power. Now, at high doses, ketamine seems to block glutamate. That's why it's such an effective anesthetic. But in low doses, like what you might find at a club, or in a spray of the FDA-approved drug esketamine, it actually ramps up glutamate production, and that comes with all kinds of side effects. It can make you hallucinate or feel as though you're losing touch with reality. And it might also help build new connections or synapses between neurons, electrifying new parts of that city grid.
When people are stressed for a long time, or when they suffer from depression for a while, they start losing these connections. And when we give them ketamine, 24 hours, they reverse. Now they look like more a normal brain. So we believe that perhaps ketamine is working by regenerating these connections that are needed for normal brain functioning.
And that could make ketamine one of the best drugs out there for treating depression. This isn't how other antidepressants work. Medications like Prozac and Zoloft take weeks if not months to kick in. And they regulate serotonin, another chemical in the brain which scientists have long tied to depression. These more traditional drugs may work for some people, but not for everyone. In fact, as many as 4 million American adults have treatment-resistant depression. And for them, well, ketamine might be the only drug out there that can provide relief. That's according to Dr. Andre Atoyan. He's the founder of Ketamine Specialists, a clinic where he administers ketamine to patients with mood disorders, pain, and addiction.
Ketamine is the agent that works when most others have failed. It is something that really allows us to give patients a sort of new hope, because a lot of people that I treat have basically already tried everything. And they're in the situation where nothing's really working and they're suffering, they're miserable.
So it's hard to deny that ketamine's effect on depression sounds promising. And clearly it's a useful sedative. But here's the thing.
As far as effect, it's, there's still a lot we don't know.
That's Dr. Nolan Williams, an assistant professor of psychiatry at the Stanford University Medical Center. He says that because ketamine manipulates so many different receptors in the brain, it's been hard to nail down all of them. So it's still unclear how it might affect different patients, both short and long term. And researchers still haven't figured out how to preserve its benefits as an antidepressant.
The challenge is how to maintain this new connections, Is it to give ketamine repeatedly? We know that we cannot give it every day. That's like substance of abuse, because then it will harm the brain.
So, while FDA approval is considered a victory for the millions of people with treatment-resistant depression, doctors still caution that ketamine should only be used as a last resort.